I'm 78 years old, and I don't blush easily anymore. At this age, there isn't much point in pretending. The body has already told its truths. The mirror has too. And if I'm honest, most of what I believed about sex at 40, 50, even 60 was built on fear of losing something I didn't yet understand. When you get to be my age, you realize how much of your life was spent trying to stay wanted, not loved, not known. Wanted. There's a difference. Right now, I live alone in a small house that's too quiet after sunset. My husband has been gone for 9 years. The bed feels wide, even though it's just a queen. I sleep on one side, out of habit. Sometimes I still reach across in the dark. Muscle memory is a stubborn thing. People think that by 78, desire disappears. It doesn't. It just changes its clothes. It becomes quieter, less urgent, but in some ways, more honest. When I turned 40, I panicked. I remember standing in my bathroom, leaning into the mirror, pulling the skin near my eyes tight with my fingers. I'd found my first real wrinkle the week before. My youngest had just started middle school. My body wasn't the same body that had carried babies. My husband was working longer hours. I felt replaceable. Sex at 40 was less about pleasure and more about reassurance. I didn't know that at the time. I thought I was trying to keep the spark alive. That's what the magazines called it. Keep the spark, as if it were a candle you could protect with the right lingerie or the right diet. But what I was really trying to keep was proof that I was still desirable. In my 20s, sex was messy and hopeful. In my 30s, it was squeezed between responsibilities. But at 40, it became a test. Every time he reached for me, I relaxed. Every time he didn't, I noticed. He wasn't unkind. He was tired. Life does that to men and women both. But I took his exhaustion personally. I started trying harder. New nightgowns. Initiating when I felt uncertain. Smiling when I didn't feel like smiling. I wish I could say it brought us closer. It didn't. It made me anxious. At 50, something shifted again. My body began its quiet rebellion. Hot flashes, sleepless nights, dryness I didn't expect. No one had prepared me for how physical it would be, how humbling. Sex became uncomfortable, sometimes painful. I didn't tell him at first. I didn't want to seem difficult. I didn't want to admit that I was changing in ways I couldn't control. So I endured it for a while. That's the hard truth no one likes to say. Sometimes women endure intimacy instead of experiencing it. I told myself it was temporary, that if I just pushed through, things would settle. And they did, eventually. But something else settled too, a quiet resentment I didn't name. He never forced me. That's important to say. But he didn't ask many questions either. We were a generation that didn't talk about these things. You adjusted, you coped, you stayed married. By 55, sex had become less frequent. We both pretended not to notice. The children were grown. The house was quieter. We could have rediscovered each other maybe. But instead, we drifted into routines. We sat in separate chairs in the evening, watched separate programs, went to bed at slightly different times. Intimacy isn't just physical. It's conversational. It's the small brush of a hand in the kitchen. It's the way someone looks at you when you're not performing. We lost that first. The physical part followed. At 60, I thought desire was supposed to be over. That's what society seemed to imply. Older women were grandmothers, gardeners, volunteers, not lovers, but I still felt it. Not the urgency of youth, not the hunger, but the longing to be touched with intention, to be seen as a woman, not just a role. My husband developed heart problems when he was 62. Medication changed him, slowed him down. Sex became rare, then almost non-existent. We didn't fight about it. We just let it fade. I told myself it didn't matter. That companionship was enough, and it was mostly. But here is the truth I carry now. We should have talked more when we still could. We should have admitted our fears. His about aging, mine about disappearing. Instead, we protected each other from discomfort. And in doing so, we protected ourselves right out of closeness. When he died at 69, I was 69 too. We had been married 47 years. The first night alone, I lay in bed and realized something strange. I didn't just miss him. I missed the possibility. The possibility that tomorrow we might try again. That maybe next week we'd find our way back to each other physically. That there was still time to repair what had thinned between us. Death removes the illusion of later. In my 70s, something surprising happened. The ache for touch returned in a new form, softer but clearer. I began to understand that sex was never just about performance or frequency. It was about connection, about saying, without words, I am here with you, fully. I dated once, at 72, a widower from church. We had coffee. We held hands once during a walk. When he kissed me, I felt my heart race in a way I hadn't felt in decades, and I was terrified. Not of him, of being vulnerable again, of comparing him to my husband, of my aging body under new hands. We didn't continue. It was easier to retreat into widowhood, into safety. Sometimes I wonder what might have happened if I'd been braver. But bravery at 72 feels different than bravery at 22. The stakes feel heavier. You know how much loss costs. The hard truth about sex after 40, 50, 60 is that it forces you to confront yourself, your insecurities, your grief, your expectations. It asks you whether you're seeking connection or validation. It asks whether you're willing to speak when something hurts physically or emotionally. I wasn't always willing. I delayed conversations. I assumed there would be more time. I thought we would circle back to intimacy once the children were older, once the stress eased, once retirement came. There's always an once, but life keeps moving the goalpost. Looking back, the damage wasn't dramatic. It was slow. A declined invitation here, a silence there, a joke that deflected seriousness, years stitched together with small avoidances. No single moment destroyed our closeness. It just thinned out, and by the time we noticed, we were already older, already tired, already careful. If I could sit across from my 40-year-old self, I wouldn't tell her to buy prettier lingerie. I'd tell her to speak honestly, to say, I'm afraid of losing you, to admit when something feels uncomfortable, to ask him what he's afraid of too. Sex after 50 isn't about acrobatics. It's about gentleness. It's about adjusting without shame. Sex after 60 isn't about proving you're still young. It's about accepting you're not and finding beauty in that anyway. Bodies change. That part is unavoidable. Skin softens, energy dips, hormones shift like unpredictable weather. But what hurts more than physical change is emotional distance. Now, at 78, I understand that desire was never the enemy of aging. Silence was. I have gratitude, I really do. I had decades of companionship, shared holidays, shared grief, shared laughter in the dark. But I also carry sorrow for the conversations we postponed. There are nights when I sit in this quiet house and think about the last year of our marriage, how careful we were with each other, how polite. Politeness can be a kind of loneliness. If you are 40 or 50 or 60 and listening to someone like me, I won't tell you to chase passion like you're 25 again. I will tell you not to disappear. Don't shrink your needs to avoid awkwardness. Don't assume your partner can read your mind. Don't trade intimacy for convenience year after year and expect it not to cost something. The cost is subtle. It shows up decades later in a quiet bed. I don't regret loving my husband. I don't regret the life we built. But I do regret how often I chose pride over vulnerability. How often I pretended I wasn't hurt. How often I let embarrassment silence me. Sex after 40 isn't a tragedy. It's an invitation. After 50, it's a negotiation with reality. After 60, it's a gift fragile, imperfect, deeply human, and one day, it's gone. Not because you stopped wanting, necessarily, but because time did what time always does. I don't feel bitterness now, just a steady awareness that life is shorter than we believe at 40. If this confession means anything to you, let it be this. Closeness doesn't maintain itself. It requires uncomfortable honesty, especially as the body changes. I sit here at 78 with memories that are tender and incomplete. I no longer worry about wrinkles or being wanted. I think about being known. In the end, that's what lasts longer than desire. The feeling that someone saw you aging body, quiet fears, shifting needs, and stayed close anyway. I had that in parts. I just wish I had protected it better. Now the house is quiet, the bed is wide, the nights are long, and I understand finally that intimacy was never about youth. It was about courage. I learned that a little too late, but I learned it.